Okay, this is going to be one of the funnest teachings of my life. Get ready. I may even sit down on this one. Okay, there's something that's come up that I thought was really quite exciting and interesting. You know, people toss around numbers like 1 million, 1 billion, and 1 trillion. But how many of you know that doesn't mean a lot to us other than it's a lot? How does 1 million differ from 1 billion and differ from 1 trillion? Well, I find the best way to explain it is through time. 1 million seconds is how long? Okay, we're going to break it down. 1 million seconds is how long? 12 days. 1 million seconds is 12 days. So this just is to give us a comparison. So how long would 1 billion seconds be? I gave you the first one. How long do you think 1 billion seconds is? 6 months? Anybody else? Difference between 1 million and 1 billion. 1 billion seconds is 31 years. 31 years. Now you get an idea of the difference between 1 million and 1 billion. How about 1 trillion? How long is 1 trillion seconds then? If 1 billion is 31 years, how long is 1 trillion seconds? Any guesses? Any guesses? What's the difference between 1 billion and 1 trillion? Okay, you say 1,000 years? How long has it been since Adam? 6,000 years. Okay, are you ready? 1 trillion seconds is 31,688 years. That's the difference between 1 billion and 1 trillion. 1 trillion seconds is 31,688 years, and we are $32 trillion in debt here in the United States. This kind of helps you get another figure on how much the U.S. debt is and how close we really are to financial collapse. 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years, and we are $32 trillion in debt. Does that kind of help everyone get a better idea of where we are at? We are past the swirly mode, okay? But this is where our politicians have taken us by, both parties. It's just been escalating. You can see the debt ceiling down here at the bottom. In 2012, we weren't doing that bad, but look how it's progressed up to 2022. We kept raising the debt ceiling, and now we're over $30 trillion. And just in 2012, it was only a couple, $15 trillion in debt. But we are at that exponential curve where it is not going to go down. It is just going to escalate like you've never seen, even like it has been. And this happened. This is 10 years, guys. This is in 10 years. From 2012 to 2022 is 10 years. If in 10 years we've gone up to 32 trillion, we cannot sustain this. We're living in the end times. We're living in the last days. And if you want to see war take place, wait till all the economies of the world collapse. We are the worst. We're in more debt than China or anybody else or most nations. And everyone's relying on us. And we're the ones most in debt. But anyway, that's just a little quick study. If you want to go look at it some more, you can. Okay, here we go. We are now talking again about replacement theology. And what does replacement theology do? It turns Yeshua from a Jew into this. What in the world happened? Well, one of the things that we're talking about in this series is how replacement theology affects our biblical thinking. And what we're going to study today is because of it, we've had a loss of Hebrew understanding. We've had a loss of the study methods, which is why I recommended that book. And we don't have a good idea of what the culture was like during the time of the Messiah. Here's one thing I want to mention. By understanding the Hebrew language, even the alphabet, you discover things you never would have known in any English Bible. What do they read every year on the 9th of Av? Lamentations. That's exactly right. Well, let me show you something interesting. Does anyone know how many chapters there are in Lamentations. 5 chapters. How many verses are in chapter 1? How many verses? Exactly 22, because there's 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and every verse is in alphabetical order. It's like in English, we go from A to Z, there's 26 letters. So the first verse would start with A, the second verse with B, the next verse with C, and then D. You see what I'm saying? But in Hebrew, there's 22 verses in chapter 1, and they're in alphabetical order. How many verses are in chapter 2? 22. How many are in chapter 4? 22. How many are in chapter 5? You guys are quick. Now, since there's 5, you got 1, 2, 4, 5. How many is in the middle in chapter 3 is 66. So the first 3 verses begin with the letter A, the next 3 with the letter B, the next 3 with the letter C, but it's all with the Hebrew, Aleph, Bet, Gimel. But if you don't know Hebrew, you don't know it's an alphabetical acrostic. The entire book is. But there is an anomaly that I'm going to point out to you. Here is Lamentations 1, and you can see in English how each verse, H, S, J, T, H, F, there's no order like there is when you look at the Hebrew. All of a sudden, everything is in an order, so you know it's a God thing. Like I said, there are 22 verses in Lamentations 1, and these are the Hebrew words, but you can see it goes Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Bob. So that's how it goes. But now I want to point something out. Here is the 14th letter, 15th, 16th, 18th letter, and I want you to notice right in the middle, number 16, what letter is that? Ayin. And what does ayin mean? Eye. It means to see, to have vision. And this is the Shabbat of vision, to see. The letter Pei, what is Pei? Mouth. That's exactly right. In other words, we're supposed to see also means to know. We're supposed to know before we talk. All too often we talk about what we don't know anything about. Well, guess what? Lamentations 2, there's 22 verses again, alphabetical order, except, look what happens. The Pei comes before the ayin. They're the only 2 letters, and they're not in alphabetical order. They're swapped. What does that communicate? Things are going amiss. Things are going amiss. They're beginning to talk about things they don't know what they're talking about. And then in Lamentations 3, again, it's an alphabetical order except the Pei and the ayin. It's getting multiplied. They continue to talk about what they don't know. And then in Lamentations 4, it's back to alphabetical order, except again, the Pei and the ayin are missed. See, these are things you don't see in English. You're going to see it in the Hebrew. Well, guess what happens in Lamentations 5? All 22 letters are used, but everything is scrambled. It's become total chaos, which is what you see from the destruction of the temple in Lamentations. Everything is fine, and then they begin to evil tongue and to speak like they shouldn't, and it degenerates into complete chaos, woo, like that, in chapter 5. So anyway, these are some of the things why you have to study your Bible with the Hebrew mindset, because then you're going to see things you've never seen before. Talking about study methods. Well, the important thing is this. I believe the Hebrew language is the DNA of creation. God created it through what? Words? And he spoke Hebrew when he spoke. Think about it. He had to speak. Well, he had to use words. He had to use letters. That's why in Genesis 1:1, it says, Bereshit, bara, Elohim, Aleph Tav. That can also be translated as, in the beginning, God created the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph to Tav. Just like A to Z. Well, what language do you think is the closest to Hebrew? The language closest to Hebrew is the chemical language. Just like H2O. All right? Hebrew is letters and numbers. And in Hebrew, if you look at the Hebrew, you can find out more about anything than you could if you look at it in any other language. Let me give you an example. H2O means more than just water. You know There's hydrogen and oxygen, and so it really describes it more. So when you see mayim, mayim means what in Hebrew? Water. And if you notice, there's two mems and one letter U. That's almost like the chemical language, 2 and 1. Well, in Hebrews, every letter is like an atom. And when combined with other letters, you have the description of what the reality is. So if we learn the Hebrew alphabet, we can learn the meaning of reality. Because what is reality? It's made up of letters and numbers. So here we go. Are you ready? Look at Genesis 2:19. We're going to start there. You can see here's a picture of Adam being created. And in Genesis 2:19, it says, out of the ground, the Lord God formed every beast of the field, every fowl of the air, and brought them to Adam to see what he would call them. And whatever Adam called every living creature, that was the name. Okay, so what was his name? Adam. Here it is. The Aleph, the Dalet, and the Mem. We have 3 letters here. Well, what does that tell us about mankind? Okay, the Aleph is similar to the A, the Dalet to RD, and the Mem, and that's why you get Adam, because when you transliterate it, you can see where we get the name Adam from. Well, these 3 letters, what all does that tell us? Number 1, the Aleph is the first letter of God's name. So that tells us we were created in God's image. It also has 3 letters. That tells us we're a tripart being, body, soul, and spirit. Like in 1 Thessalonians 5:2 and 3. It says, may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely. May your whole spirit, soul, and body be preserved blameless at the coming of the Lord Messiah. Okay, so what do we see here? Just from the Hebrew word Adam, we see we are a tripart being. We see we're created in God's image. Now, let me ask you something. How many of you have a soul? None of us have a soul. We are a soul. We have a body. The soul is what's going to remain. So we always think of us, having a soul. Well, you are a soul. What you have is a body and God's Spirit breathed into you. That's a whole other way, a whole other perspective of looking at things. So let's look at our genetic makeup from the Hebrew language. Now, here we go. Here we have Adam. Everyone see Adam's name? God created Adam out of what? The ground. Well, guess what? Adamah means dirt. Adam comes from dirt, and we see Adam comes from Adamah, dirt. And what are we going to return to? Dirt. So in Hebrew, the very name Adam means we're a tripart being, we're created in God's image, and we're made from dirt. Guess what else? Dam in Hebrew means blood. We all got to have blood or we're going to die. Look at how this is also the chemical language. Now, when you see Dam, which means blood, they also have numerical values. The Mem is 40, the Dalet is 4, which equals how much? 44. Okay. Where do we get our blood from? Our mother and our father. And in yellow, Av is dad and Im is mom. Well, guess what? Av is 3. Im is 41. Together, our mother and father equals 44, which is the word for blood, where we get our blood from. Which tells us children can't come from 2 mommies or 2 daddies. Isn't that fascinating? It's all in the Hebrew language. Okay, so Genesis 2:7, it says the Lord God formed man, or Adam, of the dust of the ground, Adamah, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man, what? He became a living soul. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. All right? And then in Genesis, this is amazing. In Genesis 4:10, when Cain killed Abel, he said, what? God said to Cain, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. and you have dam, and you have adamah, okay? But you know what's incredible that you do not see in English, you only see in Hebrew? The word blood is in the plural. It's your brother's bloods. All the generations that cannot be born are crying from the ground. You don't see it in the plural in English. It's like moose doesn't have a plural. Well, blood in Hebrew has a plural, and this is all of your brother's bloods are crying out from the ground. Now, what else are we made up of besides blood? What do we have to have? We're like 70% water. Well, Adam, the mem, means water, like in Mayim. So we can see that we're also made of water. Well, guess what else? Let me see what I got here. I have here that blood represents the physical side of who we are. We can't be just spiritual. We can't be just physical. The challenge of our life is to merge the physical with the spiritual together. And the average human body has 60 elements, and we are 70% water. That's how much water we are, 70% water. But guess what? There's more. In the Hebrew word Adam, there's the word ed. And ed means a fog, a vapor. And what do we find in the book of James 4:14? Whereas you know not what will be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor. Oh my gosh. And then it passes away. So right here in the very word Adam, we see we come from the dirt. We have to have blood. We have to have water. And we're a fog, a wind that passes away. Now, you're not going to get that if you believe in replacement theology, because you're not going to understand the Hebrew language or the Hebrew culture. Now, wait, there's more. This is the modern font. The ancient font that Moses would have used, you see the Aleph was an ox, the leader. The ox goes first, carries a load like Dad does. And that's why Dad is Av, the leader of the house, Aleph Beit. Well, so here you have the ox is the Aleph, which means the leader or the first. Then you have the Dalet, that's a tent door. And then you have the Mem. Now, the Mem means water, but it's in this case, it's chaos, like a tsunami coming. Okay, it's crashing waves of water. So we see here that Adam was the leader through the door into chaos. When you look at the picture language, you following me? So that's why Hebrew is so amazing. Now, let me ask you, let me see, what else? Okay, here's the burning bush. Remember Moses and the burning bush. The bush was on fire, right? And it wasn't being burnt. Why is that? Okay, so God, it says, is a consuming fire. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 24, the Lord your God is a consuming fire. How many believe that? That's the Hebrew word for fire. Aleph is strong and first, and the shin is to destroy. And so a strong destroyer is fire. That's how it's described. Now let me ask you this. Are we created in God's image? Genesis 1:26 says we're created in God's image. So guess what? If God is a consuming fire, we also are a consuming fire because we're created in his image. Man is a consuming fire. Woman is a consuming fire. And I'm going to prove to you that from the Hebrew. Here's the word for fire, right? Well, the Hebrew word for man is made up of those same two letters with the letter Yud, which is hand. So man is the one who's working in the midst of the fire. So man is a consuming fire. Woman is Isha, the same words for fire, but she has the letter Hey, which means to reveal. The fire doesn't hurt the gold and the silver and the precious stones. It refines it. So woman is what comes out of the fire after all the pruning. Well, guess what? Get a load of this. In Psalms 68:4, it says, sing unto God, sing praises to his name, extol him that rides upon the heavens by his name, Yah. It's not Yahweh, it's just Yah, like daddy and dad. His name is Yah. So woman is a consuming fire, man's a consuming fire. Now, get a load of this. when man and woman come together in marriage, the man brings the letter Yud, the woman brings the letter Hey, and together it forms God's name, and so they don't consume each other. Wow! Right there, by his name, Yah. And so what do we find? If man and woman don't have God in their marriage, all they have is fire, and they consume each other. Now, you're not going to get that from the English. You're only going to get that from the Hebrew. But isn't that amazing how God's name for fire is in man and woman's name? And we have to come together, and God has to be in the midst of the marriage. Otherwise, we will just consume each other. Okay, next. Now, this is kind of fascinating. This is in Hebrew. Can anybody read that? Reshit. And Reshit, like in the word Bereshit, okay, in the beginning, Reshit means the beginning, the first, okay? Then it's amazing, that is the word Bereshit, which means it's translated as in the beginning, right? Well, what's fascinating about this, in every Hebrew Torah scroll, the B sound, that bait, is made real big compared to the other letters because the letter bait is incredible. Why? When you think about this, well, first off, let me say this. Bait means in. That's why we get the word Bereshit to mean in the beginning. But Reshit means the first or the beginning. The Jews believe the word Reshit is another name for the Messiah. And the letter bait can also mean by or for. So that very first word we translate as in the beginning in Hebrew could also be translated as by the Messiah was all these things created, or for the Messiah were all these things created. Well, look at Colossians 1:15 through 18. Paul knew this, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn, that's Reshit, the firstborn of every creature. By him were all things created that are in heaven, in earth, visible, invisible, whether they're thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, or all things were created by him and for him. Right there in Hebrew, the word Bereshit means by the Messiah, for the Messiah, not just in the beginning. This is where Paul got this from, this verse in Colossians. But see, you don't have that understanding if you only know the English language and you don't study the Hebrew language. It goes on and says, he's before all things, by him all things consist. He is the what? The head, which is Rosh. Okay, Reshit is first fruits, right? Well, look at this. Right in the middle, there's the word Rosh. He's also the head of all things. Within that one word, Paul saw all of creation was created by the Messiah, for the Messiah, and he is the Rosh. All of that is within that one word, that he's the head of all things. He's the head of the body, the assembly, who is what? Reshit, the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that all things, he might have the preeminence. So all of this is in that word. That's how Paul studied. And that's how I'm teaching you guys to study, to look at things. But wait.